Our program and our definition of love is codependency. We don't really have a lot of healthy examples of what interdependence and love looks like.
Very much.
Both in society and film, TV, movie, all those type of different things. And so it's really kind of one of those things that is programmed into our culture, I think. And then if you go a layer deeper and we're looking at it like, okay, yeah, I can see how codependency is kind of like the norm when it comes to relationships and when it comes to how we define loving relationships. You then go the layer deeper and it's like, well, in that case, that means that a lot of relationships are stemming from complex trauma, and a lot of those relationships are going to have narcissistic personality traits. They're going to have parts of that behavior interwoven into them simply because of how interwoven it is into the fabric of society, I think.
We'll make it out and fall in love tonight.
Button, who's got the button?
I do.
Yeah, you do. Steph's got the big REC button over there.
Is that where you go? Don't button shame me.
Push that button, baby. Recording.
Okay, let's stop.
Hold on, I was trying to think. Commenced. That was the word I was missing.
In progress.
There you go. That's a good voice.
I was trying to do
The what voice?
the recording in this, I don't know.
The recording in progress voice?
Yes. I feel like that's how it would sound. Recording in progress. No, I don't have it now. It's gone.
You've got it.
It's
do
gone.
it again.
I don't want to do it
Do
again.
it louder this time so that the people at home can hear it.
Yeah, I think they're done with this. I think they want to move on.
Please do your
All right,
voice.
that's okay.
I love it.
Thank you.
Do it one more time.
No.
One more.
Quit trying to peer pressure
Recording
me.
in progress.
Done. See how good I sounded? You did really good. Okay.
If you haven't yet, go back and watch the last episode of the podcast with Tim Fletcher. Yeah. We get into it on that episode. That sounded like we were fighting.
We get into some good eye-opening awareness. Like, whoo,
yeah,
here we are.
It's a really big, profound
here
episode that covers tons of information about codependency and complex trauma and shame and narcissism and all sorts of different things.
That we know nothing about.
Well, that was the thing that I found really fascinating was we were already fans of Tim.
Yes.
And we'd already watched a lot of his content and heard a lot of his information and everything like that. But it was really wonderful to be able to sit down with him and talk about it. And some of the things, we're just going to recap a little bit for those of you that haven't listened. And please do go back and tune in and check it out. It's a really impactful episode. And the cool thing about Tim is he'll talk about things in such a way where you feel like he's been kind of following you your whole life.
Right.
Because he just kind of tells your story, at least us.
Right. Well, I remember one of his videos, and he said that he's like, you're gonna feel like I put your picture up here. Mm-hmm. You're gonna feel like I'm talking directly about you because this is how like deep the impact is and how it affects all of us in this space. And so I was like, okay. And then
sure enough.
Hi.
Sure enough, right?
Where'd you get that photo? I don't even have that one.
He's got our number. Some of the stuff that stood out to me, both during the episode and then afterwards, kind of sitting and processing it, because we went through, I don't think like a huge disconnect funk or anything like that, but oftentimes after difficult episodes of the podcast or talking about subject matter and material that is really challenging and hard for us, which codependency and complex trauma and shame, those are kind of hot button issues for us, right?
They definitely are.
And we did a pretty good job, I think, of navigating post that episode where we didn't kind of run off into our own corners too much.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I was just sitting here thinking, honestly, what I've been thinking is how, like right now I am symptomatic. I am of my, I heard a new phrase. You're going to hear it here.
Breaking news.
Instead of perimenopause, I wish I could remember the creator's name. It's not mine, but it's fantastic. She called it.
Are you forgetting it?
I am. Hold on. It's cougar puberty. And I was like, oh. So I'm like in the throes of it, and
yeah, you're smack dab in the middle of your cougar puberty.
Yeah,
that's a hard word.
It
for me to
is hard
say.
word to say. I think I'm just gonna have to go back to the peripause because I feel like everything is just kind of paused and stalling out. So I'm really like experiencing a lot right now. And like sometimes the symptoms are more than others. So I've like really bad headache. I'm not feeling good. And now you said that, I'm like, holy shit, how much of that was also the like the hangover, the vulnerability hangover, or it wasn't really that. The really sitting in the effects of it.
Yeah, the weight of it.
So the weight of it. But it's just like, it's because it's confirmation of things that already working on, things that are already coming up in the space. And now I hear it with a different light. So many profound things of awareness came in that has just really opened up my mind so much for that. So I'm like, I've got symptoms, and I was like, symptoms, we're going to take a break because that was a lot.
Yeah.
And
it was good stuff.
Good stuff that now we get to move forward. So there's a pause, there's an integration, and then there's an action. So we paused, we integrated, now we're in action. How about you?
Now we're taking an action?
Now we're taking an action. I'm in action. I think we talked about that on the episode.
If you're new to the podcast, a lot of what we're doing on this show is sharing with you what we've been navigating and going through and processing in our relationship. We've been together for 12 years, and a big chunk of that time period has been us unpacking our past and unpacking our childhoods and unpacking all of the trauma that we've experienced. And this episode, or that episode that with Tim, I mean, it spoke to so many different things, right? I know that I am incredibly codependent with you. I know that that is a struggle for me because of how unhealthy it feels at this stage of my life, right? It's something that I didn't have awareness of for a really, really long time, and now that I do. But some of the things that stood out to me that I wanted to recap a little bit was he talks about that narcissism and co-narcissism, the narcissist and co-narcissist dynamic that will play out in codependent relationships, and how that's connected to childhood and complex trauma. And oftentimes, if you have complex trauma or grew up in a home where complex trauma existed, that one of your parents most likely was on that narcissistic personality spectrum in some way. It's not always full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, and we get into this into the episode. Like we said, go back and listen to it. It's the one right before this one. But in the course of our relationship, that has been something that I have struggled with a lot. Once we started to become aware of, or once I started to become aware of how toxic my actions and behaviors were. For the first part of our relationship, I was blind to it, right? It wasn't something that I was really paying attention to. And not because I was like oblivious or ignorant, or it was really just not on my radar. I wasn't thinking about things in that way. I thought that we were just doing our relationship thing and everything was okay. And then once I started to really look at things and unpack things, and truthfully, this was right around the time period where, actually it's not, I'm sitting here thinking about the time frame, and because I feel like our relationship, we got married in 2015, things started to really go off the rails after that, and it seems like around 2017 was where things started to really change, where we both were really starting to look at our own shit. And when I started to look at all of my own stuff, it started to be really clear to me, especially more and more and more as the years went on, where narcissism was becoming more prevalent online and on social media, and more people were talking about it. I'm like, fuck, I do all of these things. These are all behaviors that I have. These are all things that I've done. These are all things that I'm still doing in some ways. And so it was really hard for me, and it has been over the years, sitting in the space of what that is, because it's not something that I feel like it's hard for me to sit here and say I'm a narcissist, because I don't really believe that I am. I don't think I would classically be diagnosed or anything like that. And I've gone through therapy, and I've had therapy and everything like that. And it's not that, it's so hard. I get caught up in it as soon as I start trying to talk about it, because like the best narcissists in the world are like, yeah, I'm not a narcissist. And they have all the ways to explain why they're not, right? But looking at it through a different lens and seeing it through that space of like complex trauma and survival and coping mechanisms, it's plain as day to me as far as where those behaviors started for me and how I learned those behaviors and who I learned those behaviors from, right? When he's breaking down and talking about complex trauma, and he's talking about the narcissist and the co-narcissist, it's really easy for me to see that relationship through the lens of my parents. It's easy to see how my mom was the narcissist and my dad was the co-narcissist, and how they navigated that back and forth over the course of their relationship. And of course, I'm just the little boy and the sponge absorbing all of that information. And so I'm learning how to be in relationship through that model that I had. And then fast forward to our relationship, suddenly we're in that dance, unconsciously, subconsciously, completely unaware for, the first 5 or 6 years of our relationship. And now we've started unpacking it all and looking at all of it. But one of the things that he talked about, not only shedding light on that dynamic of the narcissist and the co-narcissist, but also talking about how they will take turns at times where it's not always the classic narcissist and co-narcissist and that relationship dynamic always happening, but at times that they will take turns being the narcissist, where they will rotate almost, depending upon the cycle and the pattern of what they're playing out and what's going on in their relationship. And I think I can see that pretty clearly in our relationship. And like, there was a part of me that was like, whew, I'm not a 100% full-blown narcissist here. But at the same time, it just really it helped me sit with and look at it through the lens of like, this is literally just a survival mechanism. This is literally just ways that I was shown, taught, programmed to show up in relationship. And when those behaviors start coming out and presenting themselves, at this point in my life, it's my reminder of like, oh, I'm really activated. What's going on? It's me seeing them almost like as they're happening and being able to stop the behaviors and recognize and reflect what's happening to me right now. Why am I this triggered? What am I actually feeling? How am I this afraid right now in this moment? And what can I do to help that part of me so that I'm not using those really maladaptive, toxic coping mechanisms that I learned in childhood? So that was a thing that stood out to me, was the fact that they'll take turns, partners will take turns kind of going through that cycle and through that pattern. And you and I both know how much we have a pattern, have a cycle of that trauma bonding and the enmeshment and the love bombing and everything that's just, that's a pattern that we played out over and over and over again. And we still do sometimes.
Yeah. I think hearing about how the cycle would go was helpful too, because right off the bat, like how you're saying, you felt that relief, right? And it takes, like, there's a lot of accountability that has to be held here, because that is hard. First of all, it's hard for learning what co-narcissist is exactly is a hard pill to swallow, but it's a necessary one to engage with. Otherwise, you're just repeating the behaviors. And it is that, like, you have, the quick version is the narcissist is, it's all about me. I'm so great. I'm like, you need to do what I want to do. I'm in, like, it's up to me. It's control. It's what I want. Matter. It's my mood. It's all of these things. And then the co-narcissist is, I'm not good enough. I'm not, my way can't be true. I can't be, everything has to go with your way. Let me caretake you. Let me make sure you have your needs met. So you can see how well they go together in the terms of a codependent relationship, and which all comes from complex trauma, which he gets into. Go listen to him talk about it. I don't know.
Yeah, he's an expert.
Yeah.
We're just a couple of podcast hosts that are doing our best to navigate healing together, right? Tim Fletcher is an expert on this topic.
And you can hear all about it in the previous episode. So, but hearing that was a really big shift in learning the accountability, because the first thing that, like, the co's going to do is be like, I knew it. I knew it was my fault. It's all like, I created this. I'm responsible. I've done everything wrong. And you're like, dude, that you're doing it right now. Take a moment and hear that. And it's just about bringing awareness. This isn't about shame. Like, one of the things that we say is not shame, blame. It's to explain. So when you have an idea of what's going on and you're both willing to look at it and see where it's coming from, it's not saying, oh, it's all your fault. It's saying, I see how that happened. I see how I've picked up these behaviors. I see how, like, my parent dynamic was, it was hard for me to see narcissists and co-narcissists in that dynamic, because the narcissistic person was so strong, and still is the dominating force. So it was like, I think it's pretty much, there's not a lot of give and take in that one on the narcissist, co-narcissist, but then I can see how it did happen. And the thing is that you're in that space in your codependent relationship, and relationships that you were taught how to behave this way. You teach your children. You teach your children. So before I start to move on, what I taught children on how to be, I have to look at what I was taught. And some of the factors, I had a really good trainer on how to be codependent. And in that phrase, that co-narcissistic phrase, that word is so hard to say. It's like, it makes you sick to your stomach.
Is it hard for you to sit in that space of like if we're just going to classically label ourselves? I think tradition. Sorry, did I cut you off?
A little bit.
Sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay.
You're giving me the squirrel eye. Like, motherfucker, I was talking
like,
here.
hold on. I was saying things that were hard.
Keep going, babe.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is hard to. It's hard to sit in that space, but it's a hard I'm willing to do. Like, I'm not willing to put the blinders back on.
Yeah.
And not getting that, because it explains so much. And when you start to have awareness and understanding, you can start to heal through that. You can start to make changes. You can start to make shifts. And if you don't sit in things that aren't working in your space, then how are you going to change them? So it's hard. You know, it's like, whew. And then I have to be careful, because I will very much see, that's why I'm garbage. See, this is why it's my fault. See, if I would have just listened to Craig, you know, all of these things, just listen to whoever. So I have to be like, well, actually, this is my power. I chose to give that away at this moment. This is my choice. I've got this. These were my actions. And now I can change them. I can't change your behavior. I can't choose or change how you process this and what it means to you and how it's sitting with you and how you're sitting in this space. But I can affect my life and my change and how I sit in it, and not giving my power away and owning myself in that space. And it's also hard, because I have this part of me that's like, I don't know what to do, you know? So it's hard to sit in. I feel like I lost track of where I was going with that.
Yeah, I totally interrupted you.
That's okay. Thank you for letting me try to finish my thought. There's a lot here.
There is so much here. And I think that the topic itself is one of those things where I hope that we can continually talk about it on the podcast and bring it to the podcast and share it, because the truth of the matter is, it's one of those things that it triggers everybody at this point, I think, to hear it, right? Nobody wants to be labeled a narcissist. Everybody wants to point out the narcissist. Everybody wants to say, that's that behavior over there. That's not me over here. And truthfully, go ahead.
No, I almost did. I was like, I almost did keep going. Well, I almost interrupted you too.
You're fine. I think that the reality is because that's the other thing that Tim talked about, was codependent relationships are, I mean, it's almost like here in the Western culture, in the Western society, over here in America, North America. I mean, the reality, I think, and he talked about it too, was that love is, like, our program and our definition of love is codependency. It is a codependent definition. We don't really have a lot of healthy examples of what interdependence and love looks like.
Very much.
Both in society and film, TV, movie, all those type of different things. And so it's really kind of one of those things that is programmed into our culture, I think. And then if you go a layer deeper and we're looking at it like, okay, yeah, I can see how codependency is kind of like the norm when it comes to relationships and when it comes to how we define loving relationships. You then go the layer deeper and it's like, well, in that case, that means that a lot of relationships are stemming from complex trauma, and a lot of those relationships are going to have narcissistic personality traits. They're going to have parts of that behavior interwoven into them simply because of how interwoven it is into the fabric of society, I think. And so I'm grateful that it's a topic that gets talked about more and more, and that it's like one of those things that you'll hear about and see about. And sometimes I get, here we go again, somebody else talking about narcissists. But I think it's important too to look at it, at least for me at this point, through that lens of how much of that behavior and how much of my behavior that I was unaware of at the time, and still am sometimes, right, is truthfully just coming from those coping mechanisms, coming from that fight or flight response and implementing the things that I, was shown and experienced and kind of absorbed over the course of my childhood. What came up? What were you going to say? Where you were so kind not to interrupt me?
Oh, I don't remember.
No, it's gone.
It's gone. It's gone. No, one of the things that stood out too is he simplified something like a program that I very much have, and it's not like I'm not the only one, but I'm very much like let's see if this resonates. But he simplified a program that I have that is a program that he feels we all have, and I see that, but I was overcomplicating it. And as soon as he simplified this thing, it felt so liberating, and it made so much sense, and it was just like, whew. And it was like you take a loving action, or no. Okay, so first of all, go back and listen to the episode so you hear the person say it right, you hear the expert. But it's like it changes the dynamics, and whether it's through religion and culture, it's the culture base that changes the dynamics of if you say, I don't have any needs, I bypass all of my needs and only worry about somebody else's needs, then that is loving. You get that's a rewarded, that's a loving action.
Right, the martyr.
The martyr is loving. That's how you love. And if you are, if you're you shame yourself and it says oh, I'm not good enough. I could never be as good as you. I could never I'm not good enough to do that. Then you're being humble. So shame is encouraged, as well as that not having any needs, only people pleasing going is encouraged. And so as soon as you are, wait a minute, I have needs too. I get to have needs met. I get to take care of myself. Then that is actually you're not being loving, you're being selfish. And if you're I did a good job, you have pride in yourself. And if you feel you can accomplish things, then you're being too what word did he use?
Yeah, you're cocky, your ego.
Yeah. It's you're not being humble. If you're proud of yourself, then that's gross. So you have to not have any needs. You have to constantly people please, only caretake others, and never think you're good enough. And then you are being a good person. And then you are being a loving, humble person. And it was just whoa. That's absolutely, I don't know, maybe you're feeling that too, of that's the program. And it's so simplified when he says it, because as soon as you see it in that little simplified approach, it was oh, I can start unwinding all of that, because I very much see that. And it's not being able to see it that way takes off the attachment to the society that gave it. It takes off the attachment to the parent that gave it. For me in this space, now I've been dealing with this for a while, so it's not oh, I just heard this and now I'm working on healing that. I've been in this muck for a long time, trying to unpack and really value worth of myself. So, but it took off the attachment that almost felt like a way that I was holding on to that parent in a sense. It's I see that as a program. I see that as a lie that I was given, and I don't have to participate in that anymore. I know what is true for me in that space. So it was just I got to step out of the box that I was dancing in, trying to figure out how I got in that box, and just that was such a liberating moment to see it simplified so much.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you have any experience with that?
Not with that one specifically. Yeah. Like I said, the one that stood out to me was the dance between the narcissist and the co-narcissist, kind of exchanging roles at times. And then the other one that really stood out to me was just and he spoke about it too, the clarity and the reminder of in relationships, you'll come together with baggage, right? You have baggage, your partner has baggage, and then you come together and create baggage together in your relationship. And then at some point you start working on your relationship, and all you want to address is the shared baggage that was created in the relationship. But that doesn't work. You have to first address all the stuff that you came to the relationship with before you even try to start unpacking all of the stuff that was created in the relationship. And the reminder of that and the way that he articulated it, and it's the same thing that we experience all the time where we will hear things over and over and over and over again. And sometimes it's like just enough of a nuance, or I think oftentimes the reality is too, what happens is we don't have as much shit in our ears, right? We're not clogged up with so much distraction and, you know, like we don't have our trauma ears on at a certain point. So we might hear something new, even though we've heard it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it was a really good reminder that that is so crucial. And especially in codependent relationships, because that's the dance that we did. We came to our relationship with, you know, probably equal amounts of dump trucks worth of shit. And then we went ahead and just started making our own trauma and chaos and baggage together. And that's all we wanted to look at. That was like the thing that was the focus for a really long time, was how are we going to solve this problem that was only created within the span of the last few years of us being together. And all of that had nothing to do really, I think, with either of us necessarily in that relationship at the moment. It all had to do with all the stuff from the past. And so that's a really good reminder for me at the moment. And I think it's a really good reminder for people out there as well, especially if you feel like you're in a relationship where you're trying to work on stuff together. It's so important to remember that if you don't address your own stuff, you're never going to fix the stuff that has occurred and happened and is continually happening in your relationship, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can say that for certainty, can't you? Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. You definitely, you can't. You're not going to, without looking at your own stuff, then nothing, no relationship that you're in, whether it's with your partner, your parents, your kids, your coworkers, your friends. If you are not working on yourself, then it's really impossible to start to heal those relationships. And sometimes it's impossible to work on yourself because you are so busy surviving.
Yeah.
So it's not you know, you're not failing if you can't get to that space. There comes a time when a space opens up and it's up to you whether or not you walk into that. But if your space isn't there right now, you do not have the ability because you were trying to survive. This isn't something else to stack onto yourself and say, look, I'm failing here too. Like when the space opens, chances are you're gonna take it and you're gonna start looking at yourself. And if you're not, then maybe this is an opportunity for you to look at that, you know? But there was something I would kind of like to add to the baggage part that I heard, because
we ain't got no more room for baggage.
Right. There was just like an outlook of it. There was like, I just want to add to that a little bit because we very much had.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate it. We set a goal for ourselves that we want to reach over 1 million people on YouTube. And truthfully, we're going to need your help to get there. So if you haven't yet, head over to YouTube and subscribe to the Steph Craig Show. And be sure to click that notification button so that you get a little ding every time we release a new episode. We're really grateful that you chose to listen to our podcast, and we hope that you're enjoying this episode. Now let's get back to it.
Like I had my baggage, you had your baggage, and then we had our baggage. But what it kind of felt like for going into our relationship, and maybe it'll feel, is that when we went into it, it's like we both agreed that I had a lot of baggage, but not so much you.
Yeah.
And so my baggage was the problem, and my baggage was what was the problem in the relationship. And for my role, that I was like, it's because I have a lot of baggage. I have a lot of garbage. And then you didn't. That's the
that's the narcissist dance there. Yeah.
Right. And those are, again, tendencies. So look at it, but be willing to, when you're starting to see yourself reflected in this, it's an opportunity to look at it. It's not so you label and blame and say, oh, I'm a narcissist, or you're a narcissist. Like, oh, we're playing that role. We're playing that role. What are we going to do about that? And then at some way, the flipping, it started shifting because enough of your non-baggage self started to really contribute to the baggage. And then I got to go, look at your baggage. Look what you did. You know, and so that's that third set. And so I was able to take like, oh, my baggage, because like, look at, now we have to deal with all this. And so there's the flip role, because now it was really nice to not have to like, well, maybe my baggage wouldn't be so heavy if you weren't adding to it. You know, see here, it's those tendencies, it's those roles that you play. And also, like, to be completely honest, it's like he said another part of like both of them are afraid of abandonment.
Yes.
So the narcissist is afraid of being abandoned. And it's really hard to see that as the co-narcissist or the codependent, because it feels like they make you feel like you're chasing them, that they're going to leave at any moment. They really strike that fear of abandonment. So to hear that, oh, it's coming from them having a fear of abandonment, it's like, well, then why are you doing that shit to me, right? Why are you doing that to me? Poor me. There's the role again. So you have to like really look at the possibility of they're hurting too. And it doesn't mean that you start caretaking them and doing all that, but it's, if you're healing this together, then you have to be accountable for yourself and empathetic for your partner, not blaming, shaming on your partner. Now, this isn't going for physical abuse relationships. We do not talk about seeing their side of it. That is like, get yourself to safety, get safe however you can, reach out, talk to people, and you are your priority in that. You can look at whatever healing comes later, but your safety is the priority. So having that space was just to be able to sit with that and see that was a big shift for me. That was a big shift to look at tendencies and see how that plays out. So if that luggage is relating to you, then, how is that playing out? Is it almost like this entitlement that what's the point I was going to, is when, for lack of better words, when you messed up enough, okay, when you caused enough damage in this relationship that I loved you through, I thought, okay, now you're going to see I really love you. Now I've earned my space. Now you're going to love me because I've shown you. And then when I didn't, I still had to chase you, was like, what the fuck? So there was so much, it really took me, and I'm still working on this, stopping chasing you. Stop chasing the fear of the abandonment and just focusing, caretaking myself. Looking at what I needed, look at what I was no longer willing to tolerate. And luckily, you did the same. And we both had a lot of accountability to take. And it's really interesting how much accountability you actually have when you're no longer placing 100% of it on the other person.
Right. Which we both took turns doing.
Yeah.
Like you said in the beginning, I'm like, baby, if you can get all that baggage taken care of, our relationship's going to be a lot easier, right? Mm-hmm. It reminds me, too, of an earlier episode that we did with Matt and Ash, where Matt was talking about how it almost seems like in relationships, and I know that they could relate to it, and I know that we can as well, where it's like you have to address it's almost like the biggest problem that is happening first, right?
Yeah, so
where I was the one that was causing as much surface level, day-to-day reality, this is what we're facing and this is what we're dealing with. It was my shit. It was my stuff, even though I didn't think that it was, right? And we had to address all of that first, almost, which truthfully kind of sucks. I don't like that that's the way that it kind of played out. But the more that we were able to kind of navigate it and process it and go through it and not heal it by any means, right? It's an ongoing journey, but we had to face this stuff first before there was space, I think, for your stuff. And there's some weird, I'm sure that that's some dynamic of the narcissist, co-narcissist there, the codependency, do you know what I mean? It's like there's a part of my subconscious that has to take up the most space in order to be seen, even though it doesn't really want to be seen, right? All of the things that I was doing, and we can talk about it. Are you comfortable getting into some of it? I don't know how much we want to talk about necessarily on this episode because we're just kind of recapping in a sense, but.
I'm not exactly sure where you're going.
Okay.
I did get nervous, so I'm like, we could talk about it. I'm like, I don't know, my mouth's dry. Where are we going with this? We can talk about it at any point. I can say, I'm not ready to talk about it on the podcast, but I don't really know where you're exactly going. So why don't we open up a conversation?
Let's open up the conversation a little bit because, again, this comes from the dynamic of unconscious behaviors that were playing out in the early years of our relationship. Things that were taking place and happening that we weren't consciously aware of. And what I mean by that, and this is the hard, slippery thing of trying to talk about some of these things, because it's so easy to just look at like my actions as an adult, because I'm very much an adult, right? We were, what was I, like 30, 31 or something like that when we met. So very much an adult, fully responsible for my choices and my actions. And yet there was a lot of stuff that was happening unconsciously that I was doing and not understanding why. And so from the get-go, when it came to our relationship, we had all of the, like the love bombing and that's the other thing that Tim did a great job of in the interview or in the episode, was breaking down that pattern of what will happen when, you know, they first meet, when codependent people start getting together, and the cycles that will start to create. And we mirrored it perfectly, where I start to love bomb you in all these different ways. I start to try to do things for you. And basically it's like convincing you as much as I possibly can that you should be in relationship with me. And then once it comes to a point where, cool, we're in a relationship, we've moved in together, we're starting to make, you know, blend our lives together, we're starting to do all of these things. At that point, then all of the unconscious behaviors start happening. And what those look like are struggles with addiction and alcohol and gambling and sex and all of these other kind of things that stem from childhood, that stem from earlier things, but then they start coming out in our relationship. And like, I'm not proud of it in any way. It's not something that I'm, you know, proud of, but there was infidelity. And it wasn't something that was a one-time thing. It was an ongoing thing that would take place where I would seek out pain for sex, I guess. Like, I don't know how, it's hard, babe. I don't like talking about it. Yeah.
Like, you don't have to go that deep right now. Like, that was a big, like, this is like one of the things that we are also aware of. Like, you get to talk about every bit of it. Right. But you do not have to rake yourself over. You get to share as much as you share. And
yeah,
I'm supporting you through this.
You know, it was things like strip clubs and
maybe we don't need details with that.
Well, I mean, the details are helpful to some extent to give context, I think. But the problem in trying to discuss it and talk about it is, I mean, it's riddled with shame, right? It's a time frame in my life where I mean, I don't even necessarily think it's a time frame in my life to say it that way. What it is so many of those actions and behaviors are coming from shame. And I have early wounds as a child in relation to like sexual abuse and trauma and shame and all of those things that were hardwired into me from a very early age. And then fast forward as an adult, at least in my case, and I think probably in a lot of other people's cases, that's how it starts to manifest. And it's abandonment, it's shame. There's all these type of unconscious things that I'm feeling underneath the surface that then I'm trying to solve with really maladaptive, terrible coping mechanisms, right? And it's ugly and it's messy and it's hard. And it's also like, it is what it is. It was part of our relationship. It was part of stuff that we had to navigate. And it wasn't until, I don't even know for sure. I mean, we've talked about it before, of course, but in 2017, I went on this men's retreat that was like a week-long backpacking trip into Yellowstone. And for whatever reason, that was enough of a space for me to open up and like release. It's like a pressure valve. I had so much that I was holding on to from years of pain and suffering and anger and shame and guilt and all of these things. And I was finally able to like release it and pop that valve and let go of a lot of the emotion that I was holding on to and a lot of the anger. And then it became the process of just like peeling back the layers and unpacking all of it. And what that looks like in our relationship, I think, is exactly what we're talking about, where this codependency and this connection back and forth with each other, it's like all of my stuff was the stuff that was causing the most problems in our relationship. And had we not addressed it, had we not been willing to like go through it and sit with it and allow it to surface and come up, then we wouldn't have made it through, right?
Yeah.
It would have just been another failed relationship that we both had. And so I'm really grateful for it. But back to what I was saying was, a lot of times it seems like that somebody's shit is taking main, like center stage, and it has to be addressed first and foremost before there's enough space for the other person's stuff to come up. And I think about it too because you said earlier you were talking about like in relationships where there's physical abuse and violence and things like that. You can't heal when you're actively surviving.
No.
And I think that that's a lot of what was happening in our relationship. Not that there was physical abuse, but we were both so activated consistently all the time in trauma responses, in fight or flight, that we weren't fixing anything. It was always triage. It was always trying to solve what was happening in the moment, whether it was in our relationship or in our life. And of course, it didn't help that we were in the careers that we were in, right? That because if you're a fan of Steph and Craig for a long time, then you know that we had careers in law enforcement. And of course, that's just a perfect example of chaos and trauma and, you know, adrenaline at all times. But I'm grateful that we were able to navigate it and get to the point that we're at today, obviously. But again, all of those things that I was doing in our relationship at the time, and I know that it's hard to process on your end. I don't know how hard it is. I don't know that experience that you've gone through of what it was like to try to process it all. But truthfully, especially this far out and being able to look back, as well as having more information about my life and my childhood that I didn't have at the time, I can see it so clearly as just this like super wounded, hurt little kid that was trying to do everything that he could to survive in the reality that he was living in at the time. And I know that it's hard when people talk, like it's hard for me to hear people talk about these actions that are really detrimental in relationships, like cheating and infidelity and addiction and all of these other kind of things that are really hurtful for the other person. It's hard to differentiate between their actions and like the difference between the adult and then the coping mechanisms underneath and where they're coming from, right? So it's hard to say, hey, I was an adult and I was choosing to do these things. That's true. And I was also very much in trauma response, using skills, and skills aren't the right word, using those maladaptive coping mechanisms that I had been using since childhood as a way to try to solve that trauma, as a way to try to make myself not feel what I was feeling during those time periods. So it's hard. It's one of those things that's really difficult to unpack, especially like on a podcast.
Right.
But at the same time, it's super hard for us to navigate, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good example of what can happen with complex trauma, with codependency, with all of these things that we've been talking about, because we're not alone in this. I know that a lot of people navigate and experience very similar things. It's the stuff that people don't want to talk about in relationships. And it's the stuff that ends relationships.
Don't want to talk about it in relationships, want to talk about it in public. They just want to, like my thing too is like, let's just let it go away.
Yeah.
Just go away. Just stop happening. Just go away. And you were talking about the how it shows up. Like you were an adult making these choices, and it was coming from survival techniques that you have tried and true proven since you were a kid. But going through that, it goes back to like when you're like in survival mode, you can't heal when you're in survival mode. And so at that point in time, for me to be like, oh, I didn't have the skills at that point to be like, oh, this is his wounded inner child. This is survival skills. This is like the pain that he's going through. This has nothing to do with me. This isn't my fault. This isn't because I'm not good enough. He's going through it right now. And you didn't have the skills to say, oh, these are old maladaptive mechanisms. This is like something like I'm not processing right now, so I'm reverting back and what's actually going on. And instead, it was like how we handled it was like, I'm going through a lot right now, and can't you see it from my side? And like we just like did it completely like you don't have the skills how you want to do it. You always can look back and be like, oh, that's how I wish I would have handled it, of course. But you don't have the skills to go through it. You can't shame yourself for not doing it with the skills that you have now. We didn't have those skills. So I was like, I'm garbage. I didn't do enough. I'm like, if I tried harder, like some of it too, like you let me know, like I wasn't meeting these things. And so I'm like, check, instead of being like, this has nothing to do with me. And then to the point of what is my role and not what is my response. Like I'm not taking on that where you take the I guess the narcissist, co-narcissist tendencies and where you explain away their actions to stop them from having to be accountable. That's not what this is. I did that a lot. I would very much like, this isn't your fault. This is my fault. But there's a part of where there is a role that I had to play. And the biggest role that we can just like look at without getting onto the nuances of where people are going to stop tuning in is boundaries, right? I did not hold a boundary in this space. I didn't know how to. And when I did have the boundary, when I did learn how to hold a boundary and I held it, like you had the choice then to honor it or not. You had the choice, but you were also setting up boundaries for yourself at that point. So our boundaries started to meet each other in a healthy way instead of a codependent, or like, I'm not going to be in a relationship with this type of toxicity. And I'm not going to live my life in this unhealthy way. And so we've just been on this path. It's working a lot together, and it did not start that way. Like it was a rough ride. It was a really, really rough ride. So at some point I had to say, well, what are my actions? How am I contributing? How am I in my co everything? Like I had that co down. I was the coest of the co. Like, oh, you're going to be like, I will co-addict you. I will co-narcissist you. I will codependent you. Like, I know how to be a co.
Right? You're my ride or die, baby.
Right? I know how to be a co. I think in our vows, I said I'd be your co-pilot. So I'm like, I got this. Co, baby. I got you.
I like that you bring in boundaries, because I think you're right. I think that was one of the really big significant shifts. And like boundaries do not feel safe in codependency. Right? Like setting boundaries in a codependent relationship feels like you're basically saying, I don't love you anymore because I'm setting this boundary for myself. I'm going to bed at 9:30, whether or not you're in bed or not, right? Because I need to sleep. And that feels like I don't love you anymore, and I don't think we should sleep in the same bed anymore. It's literally what it feels like. And every time we set one of those boundaries for ourselves, like, do you remember, this was months, last year, who knows, right? There was at some point where I told you that I wanted to go away for the weekend by myself, just to have like a fucking overnight at some Airbnb where I can relax, meditate, just whatever, right? I needed, and we still haven't done it, but I remember saying that to you, and that felt like telling you, I don't love you anymore, and I'm going to go away for the weekend. Right?
What did I do, though?
Well,
do you remember?
What I remember you doing is reacting in a very Like I had, like reacting again, you asked, what did I do? So you're asking what my perception was. I'm not saying that this is what you did do, right? What it felt like was very much that codependent thing where, hey, I'm going to say the thing that I need. I'm going to speak a want, a need, a desire, or I'm going to, you know, this maybe not necessarily is a boundary per se, but I'm going to speak a need. And what it felt like was immediately that need had to go away. That need was not safe to have, and that I should never talk about it again. That's what it felt like. Okay. I'm not saying that's what you did.
No, that's what it felt like. Yeah.
But what did you do?
Is that why you haven't done it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, interesting.
What did you do?
Well, I'm not coming in with like your experience is there. It's not to override it.
Yeah, but I'm honestly curious because I recognize that in the moment when this had played out, I was very much activated because I can, like, I don't remember exactly what happened or how it happened. I don't remember the context of it. I just remember saying, I want to do this thing. And then you being like, go ahead, motherfucker, do that thing and see if I'm here when you get back.
Wow.
Now, that's not what you said, I'm certain.
Well, let's this is like
but the perception, what it felt like, what I then, you know, like you said, we haven't talked about it since, and I haven't done it. I haven't enjoyed my weekend retreat somewhere.
Right. Okay. Well, this is like a great one to get into on how things come up and how they show up in spaces. Now, my memory is my memory, my perception
it's your perception,
of it.
Yeah.
This, I'm not like, no, this is how it actually went.
Right.
You know, this is my perception, and your perception is like, you have your perception here. So my perception is we were having a moment, and I had came to you with a need of connection and saying that I didn't feel like we were connecting enough. We were driving, and I can like see the spot where we're driving. Now my memory, right? We're not having enough connection. Not like I had this need, and you came back with you needed this like space.
That was my response to you coming and saying.
Now, if you look at it that way, you'd be like, oh, you're terrible. But when we stop and we break this down with the skills that we have and what was needed, you've been having this feeling. Okay. So was your delivery at that point?
Terrible.
It was terrible. And then my response
classic Craig, though.
was like, are you serious? Right. So what happened is I'm feeling I needed connection, and you're feeling that you need some self-time. You need some time to yourself. Both are healthy wants and needs.
Yes.
And you're feeling like you're not getting enough time to yourself. I was feeling like I wasn't getting enough time with you. I started the conversation, but you're activated in the space. I have no idea. So yes, the healthy thing would have been for Craig to say, I hear you, and working on that, and then come up with your own at another time. But what happened is it felt like a violation, and that's why you felt like, not only do I feel like I not have time, now she's asking for more. So being in a space of, who knows if you were about to start to talk to me with it or not, I don't know. But it came, so that was where Craig reacted.
Wow.
Craig reacted and was like, I need time alone. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? And so I'm hurt. Then you're like mad that I'm hurt. And it was a thing. And then we stopped. Hey, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending your time with us, listening to the podcast. We know there's a lot of options out there, and you're choosing your time with us, and we're so grateful that you are. Would you do us a favor? Would you subscribe to this podcast, share it, and write us a review? This helps us build the podcast. This helps us reach more and more people, and we have a goal of reaching over 1 million people. So any amount of engagement that you do really helps us achieve that. Thank you for being here. We're so grateful to you. We're so excited that you're choosing to share your journey with us and listen to a part of ours. Let's get back to the show. We stopped after that. We had this thing, and you're like, I shouldn't have said that then. Like, this is something that I've been thinking about. And I'm like, that's not how I want it. We had a little afterwards of like, that's not how I support that. I think you should do that. And so I'm encouraging you at that point. You're like, I hear this, like, this is something that I need. This isn't like, I'm very much, you gave me reassurance in R, but was communicating your space. And then that part of the conversation where we did the adult thing, we did that, not the adult thing, but we did the healed version, right?
The healthy, mature,
the healed version,
emotionally mature adults that we are.
And we were ready to like, I have a need, you have a need, both are valid, both get to be met. And obviously they can't be met at the same times. And that's not how needs work anyways. You know, it's not like I meet your needs while you meet mine, you know? There's times my needs are met and time yours. And then we haven't talked about it since.
Wow.
So we had that really thing. And I've looked at spots that I've thought about booking you.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm going to pick the wrong spot. It's going to make him mad. So I can't. I'm going to let him bring it up whenever he does. So you've talked about like anytime you bring up something to that effect, I'm like, that's a great idea. Like encouraging that without doing the, well, let me take care of it for you. Let me book you a space. But also being afraid that I would book you a space you didn't like.
I'm genuinely fascinated in this moment because
my perception, remember,
well, that's
might not be
that's the
what
interesting
happened.
part,
it's my
right?
perception.
That's your perception of what was taking place.
Yes.
And so I'm curious as to like, I wish we had like, hurry up, Elon, and create the neural link that we can just
take your time or not. You're not going in my head, dude.
Because I want to go back and watch this scene.
You can.
Because I want to see what was happening.
Yeah.
Because the way that you describe it, I can very much see it as me. You know, it probably had been on my mind. I think it was probably on my mind for a few days, weeks, whatever,
you said
right?
You had been thinking about
it. I mean,
it.
Truthfully, it's something that I've consistently thought about for years.
Right.
Where it's like, this would be a really healthy thing for me to do. And there's a part of me that really wants to do it.
I think you should do that.
And there's a part of me that fully recognizes, like, I'm afraid to do it.
Oh, how come?
Because I'm so fucking codependent with you, babe. Because I'm so, like, I have that early abandonment wound where, like, I could go and, you know, spend a night somewhere in a cabin in the woods and enjoy a relaxing evening. And after the point of, like, I've done the things and I've gotten this, and then I'm like sitting there and I'm like, okay, now it's time to do whatever it is that you know, now it's time to relax and be with yourself. Then I'm just going to start going like,
right? It totally throws your nervous system off.
Freaking the fuck out.
Right?
Right? And then my fear is I'm going to waste the weekend by just getting high and zoning out into some fucking bliss space of like, oh, I'm communing with nature on mushrooms on this patio somewhere, when in reality, all I'm doing is panicking because I'm alone.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be really healthy for me to do at some point. But that's another reason why, it's so fascinating as we sit here and unpack this little tiny thing that surprisingly had way more. I'm genuinely curious. Like I said, I want to know what was going on in the moment because the way that you paint it and your perception of the thing, it's clear to me that I was reactionary,
yes.
that I was in an activated state because I'm trying to hurry up and say, yeah, but I need this, right? Like, you can't come to me and say, you have needs right now. My needs aren't getting met. I need this thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And then I did not handle that well.
Tim, we're going to need you to come back on the podcast. And turns out we've got some more things that we need to help unpacking and figuring out this codependency nonsense. Yeah. Knowing and learning and kind of like understanding how much of codependency comes from shame makes so much sense to me.
Right.
Like that's the other thing that we keep talking about, you and I. The more we peel back layers and layers and layers and the deeper that we go into our healing, I'm just excited. I'm so excited by it because it's like, it's hard, right? We're still peeling back stuff that's really difficult to sit with and process. And I mean, obviously on this episode, you're like, yeah, you guys ain't done shit yet. Yeah. We're a work in progress, people. We're trying to go through the process of healing lifetimes of complex trauma, and it's hard, but I'm excited because for so long in my life, it felt like I had no control over anything. Mm-hmm. And now at this stage of healing and at this stage of my life, I'm excited by the reality that I have all the control. It's up to me what happens. It's up to me how this goes. It's up to me what I want to change and what I don't want to change.
Yeah.
So when I recognize and have awareness of stuff like this, all of these coping mechanisms and all of this trauma and all of these codependent things that are really detrimental in the long run, we're not stuck here.
Yeah. Have full autonomy.
Right? It's not like suddenly it's like, well, I was just born without a leg. Not much I can do about it. I got to learn to live without a leg. Like, I have a choice. I get to control what happens. I get to make decisions and actions and take steps to change these things in my life. So I'm just excited by it.
Right.
Even though it's hard, even though it's overwhelming and scary.
And even if you were born without a leg, you still have choices. You still have choices on what you do.
I love how good you're so good at being like, hey, if you're out there without a leg and you were born that way, we still see you and validate you.
Well, we do. And
absolutely.
and it's like, but that's also a really important thing. It's not only, if you're born without a leg, if you lost a leg, you still have choices.
Exactly.
And we can't perceive to know what that is
You're
like.
so good at loving and validating people. It's such a good quality that you have.
Okay.
Sorry. That wasn't me being shitty. That was a genuine thing of like,
stop looking at me. Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Let's turn the camera on Steph.
All right. Here we go.
I'm going to do my best Jiminy Glick.
Here we go.
So, Stephanie, tell us a little bit more.
Oh, my goodness.
You're in a relationship with Craig, are you? Okay.
Okay, my train of thought's
Did
gone.
you hear the narcissist? You're in the relationship with Craig. Tell us more about what that's like with Craig.
I was like, yes, I am. I'm in a relationship with Craig. No, my train of thought has gotten a little off keter there for a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work that we have done. Thankfully, we don't have the relationship that we used to have, but we wouldn't, There's also the part that's like frustrating. Like I can sit here and I've spent a lot of time really mad at that too, that we've had so much to overcome and we didn't need to go through, we didn't have to heal through all this too. We could have just had to deal with what we had to deal with.
Are you talking about kind of like it's frustrating that we created baggage in our relationship where we didn't have to? Yeah.
Like we could have just dealt with our own baggage and not created so much.
Yeah.
And ideally, that's what everybody would like to do. But that's not what happened. And, excuse me, sometimes we stay in that space of, well, can't happen because of this. And again, we're not in survival mode. So that's another thing. Sometimes we are, but like actual like survival mode, that's very different from being activated and healing past trauma and actually being in trauma and survival mode. Two very different things. So again, those of you in survival mode and that are making it through one day at a time, just like so much love and compassion with yourself as you're going through. But from our point of view, like I used to, I guess, go through our relationship in the rearview mirror, instead of being like, okay, here we are, we have to deal with this and move forward. I'm like, this is bullshit that we have to deal with this. I'm so like, can't even begin to move. How am I supposed to, couldn't get past, well, this shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't be in our space. This shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have to deal with this. And that's like on one hand, right? Whatever. We can look at that. But the truth is it did happen. We were in that space. And as long as I was sitting here looking at what should not have happened, I couldn't make any actions. I couldn't move forward because I was too busy looking backwards saying, well, this shouldn't have happened. And because this has happened, I am here. Like, actually, like you are here because you're choosing to be here and because you're not looking forward. So like, that's a really hard space to be in, to recognize, yeah, you made baggage. We couldn't have done it any other way. If we could have done it another way, we would have.
Which is what we've seen, right?
Right.
It's what we've proven to ourselves and in this relationship where it's like, you're right. I don't think we could have done it any other way.
But we can do it differently now. And
Given
now we get to choose how
Given
we're going
all
to do it now.
the circumstances and the things that we brought to the table together, we brought a perfect set of ingredients.
We were so good.
For chaos and drama, right? And how funny is it too? I mean, I don't think we talk about this often enough, but there's a part of me that it's not to say I want the chaos of our past, but I fully acknowledge and recognize that there's a part of me that likes a little bit of chaos, that likes a little bit of drama, that likes a little bit of, you got that Bonnie and Clyde part inside of you too. Right. Like
I'm just like looking, I'm like, my smart ass was like, what can I throw at you right now? I'm like, throw water in your face. I'm like, ah, chaos. There you go. I would be lying if I didn't have awareness of the part of me that likes chaos. Well, I agree.
But that's the other thing that Tim talked about too, which I was really grateful for, was he talked about what's going on in your brain with complex trauma and cortisol and all of the different things that are taking place, right? I think that's a really important part of not just understanding and putting pieces together, but also having a good grasp of like what actually is happening neurologically and chemically and hormonally within your own body during all of this complex trauma shit.
Right? It's extremes. It's the, what did he call it?
Hold
Addiction.
on.
Sorry.
I just realized, because I'm sitting here talking about how I miss the chaos, there's a part of me that kind of like
I was going to speak to
thrives
that.
on it and craves it. I fully can sense and recognize at this point, it's the same part of me that wants to fucking smoke. Like I can feel that. It's like if I was going to, you know, if a character walks in the room and it's the guy that wants fucking chaos, he's the guy that's obviously smoking. Like it's the part of me that wants that dopamine, that addiction,
Right.
that adrenaline.
For our smoking listeners, like you're lighting up right now. Like,
Yeah, take a
We
good,
miss it too.
good long puff for us. But so I can see that it's the chemical dependency to that chaos. So the chemicals that get produced in chaos and in drama and everything, I was addicted to those.
yeah, it's the process addiction. We
Yeah.
talked about the process addiction. It's not just like the substance addiction and that you have a process addiction too. And very much,
Right.
it's not, you know.
Do you, I mean, I know you do. I want the codependent
You
part
want
of
me to say it?
Yeah. The
I don't
codependent-
like chaos.
I don't either.
I don't like chaos. But when things get really calm, I don't have as much experience with that. I don't know how to handle that. And when things are calm and things slow down, I often get scared.
Yeah.
And I will stir some shit to feel safe and normal because I know what to do when there's chaos. You give me a, you know, when things are calm, I'm like, I don't know what to do. Some shit's hitting the fan. I got action. I know what to do. So do I like it? No. Do I create it? Unfortunately, yes. Not as much as I used to.
Do you still have awareness when you create it?
Do I still have awareness?
Like after the fact at all?
After the fact, I do. A lot of times after the fact. But
I don't think I do.
but most of the time in it, I'm just like, well, shit went down clearly. So
I'm sitting up here on my high horse and being
Okay.
like, oh, you still create it.
okay.
I just
Right?
crave it,
Right?
but I don't create it.
No, you don't. No, you don't, sweetheart.
Right?
Gosh.
So up here in my ivory tower, I'm
It's a pretty
recognizing,
tower, babe.
I'm recognizing shit. Now I got to figure out how I'm creating it. Because I definitely create it as well.
Yeah, well, you know, we're creatures of habit and in a healing process, and we're doing our best.
Yeah.
And we're taught how to live in chaos and to overcome. You know, if it's calm, it's boring and you're lazy and you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
So, chaos it's all I knew how to do. It's all I knew how to do. And
Now we're learning how
that's
to be
all
chill.
you knew how to do.
Yeah.
You were really good at it too.
There's not so many times, but there's a few times when we're cruising in your new car. Steph got herself a midlife crisis charger. It's a beautiful purple charger that we love, and she has named Amethyst, and she goes very fast.
That is privileged information.
Well, it's out there now. And when we're cruising in your car sometimes, I'm like, man, let's just drop the hammer on this son of a bitch and go. Let's just fucking find the nearest cop, get into a chase. I'm ready. Especially when I'm driving. Not so
You
much when
can't
you're
drive
driving.
my car anymore.
Well, we haven't done it yet.
Yet.
Stay tuned for next
Oh,
week when we're
no.
recording live from a penitentiary here in Tennessee.
This is
After
how
we're
we'll spend our
arrested.
conjugal visits. Recording a podcast.
Again,
How's your cabin now, buddy?
right? I'm going to
Gosh.
get a lot of alone
Right?
time in my cell
Okay,
after the
that's not
police
funny.
chase.
I don't want to say this
Yeah,
anymore.
pod. Go back and listen to the episode before this one with Tim Fletcher.
Yes.
I think I don't remember what we
18?
titled it. It's 18.
Oh,
but
sorry.
anyways, it's the one right before this. It's a great episode. It's kind of what this conversation was all about and some of the things that got stirred up for us
I think
in
it's
that
almost a
episode.
prerequisite.
For sure.
So.
And if there's questions that you have, if there's things that you
yes.
relate to, One of the things that Tim talked about was coming back on and answering some questions and some other things that kind of come up from that episode. So we definitely want some feedback. We want to hear from you. Anytime when you hear stuff on the podcast, we love hearing from people and how you resonate and how it affects, or how you agree or how you disagree. By all means, please reach out, and you can find us at stephancraig.co and almost all the socials. And I say almost because some of them we don't do, right? There's not a Steph and Craig on Snapchat. There's not a Steph and Craig on X, but go find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And our goal with the podcast and everything that we do as far as content creating is just to help you through your journey by sharing ours. And yeah, that's our mission. That's our passion. Come join us.
Expect the best. Plan for the greatest. I thought you had me on that one.
One more time. Cut, edit, redo. Go ahead, babe.
Expect the best.
Plan for the greatest, including a police chase.
No.
We got a wild ride. Wait and see, you and me. We were meant to be.
We want to make something perfectly clear. This podcast is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. It's not intended to be used as a substitute for professional advice. We're sharing with you our own personal insights and experiences, things that we have found to be helpful and healing on our journey. But we are not licensed therapists. If you need help, it's important to seek out a qualified professional. Remember, we believe we all do better when we heal together. See you soon.